Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, of course, the honourable gentleman tempts me to prejudge the integrated rail plan, which I will not do because no decisions have been taken yet. However, I'm happy to confirm, Mr Speaker, that we are getting on with investing in transport for the North. We are not waiting for the integrated rail plan to be delivered. On top of the billions of pounds that we have already invested in transport across the North, just on the 26th of May, Mr Speaker, we announced 2 new stations outside Leeds at White Rose and Thorpe Park. We announced an additional £317 million for the Trans-Pennine route upgrade. Of course, over 60% of the region is now covered with metro mares, with historic devolution settlements. Mr Speaker, we are getting on with investing in the north of England.
11, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Honourable Lady for a question. Local authorities are responsible for ensuring active travel schemes are accessible to all. Government guidance, which includes the Cycle Infrastructure Design publication, reflects best practice in terms of safety and inclusivity for disabled pedestrians, cyclists and wheelchair and mobility scooter users.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr Speaker, the Government are rolling out a number of pilots for e-scooters and also supporting with their funding a number of schemes to expand active travel, and yet those schemes do not have to have accessible formats of travel for disabled people and older people, further excluding them from the benefits of active travel and moving around a car-free environment. So will the Minister ensure that every scheme which has a pilot expands that to ensure that it's fully accessible, but also puts a challenge to the sector to ensure that they provide mobility scooters and other forms of e-travel that are fully accessible for everyone in our communities?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. And it is very important that local authorities consider the impacts of e-scooters both on people with disabilities and allowing them to access the trials as well. E-scooters have the potential to offer additional means of transport, and we did allow seated e-scooters within the scope of trials to enable people with certain mobility issues to use them, and we did tell local authorities in our guidance that they must encourage groups representing the interests of disabled people in their areas to advise them on how best these people with accessibility issues could use these schemes.
A substantive question to the Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, we're working with the rail industry to develop a number of recovery initiatives focused on restoring passenger confidence in rail travel.
Let's head up to Paul Maynard. Paul.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the importance of improving passenger numbers on trains once the nation is fully reopened, marketing rail travel will be crucial, if only to keep the Treasury happy. What support will he be giving to the community rail partnerships up and down the country who do so much to both enhance the quality of local services, not just by planting out flower beds, but by making our stations more attractive, but also in attracting the leisure passengers that we will need in ever greater numbers to travel on all our railway lines?
Mr Speaker, if I may say to my honourable friend, as a distinguished former rail minister, he'll be pleased to hear that the community rail is very much at the heart of the recent white paper on rail reform, and so he can expect to see our commitment to rail community partnerships grow in the years to come, I hope fulfilling his set out ambitions during his time as rail minister.
We have a substantive question to Minister McLean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and with your permission, I'd like to answer this question along with question number 14. In addition to investing £1.7 billion in 21-22 into local roads, the Department is working towards the creation of a common data standard for the monitoring of the road condition, and this will aim to drive innovation and flexibility in monitoring local roads, and that will enable local authorities to target defects in their networks more quickly.
Go to Mark Menzies. Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Firstly, can I thank my right honourable friend for her support and that of the Department in securing the Lytham St Anne's M55 link road. After years of fighting for this project, I was delighted to see work get underway on Monday of this week. I have, however, been inundated by complaints from constituents regarding the poor quality of many of Fylde's road surfaces. So can my honourable friend assure me that the government is taking the resurfacing of roads seriously and not just simply filling in the cracks and covering over potholes?
Well, can I start by paying tribute to my honourable friend's determined campaigning over a number of years to secure the start of work on this vital road, and I'm sure that his constituents will be reaping the benefits for years to come. But he's right to say that they must be able to drive on a road that is pothole-free, and that is why the government has committed £2.5 billion through the Potholes Fund. The department takes the approach and believes that local highway authorities should develop a risk-based approach to asset management plans. That means they need to have a long-term inspection regime. They need to be proactively maintaining those roads to make sure that they are in good condition in the years to come.
Mark O'Loughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The very light rail site in Dudley, and of course Chorley could have one as well, will be a world-class innovation centre developing and testing prototypes and is installed on roads with minimal disruption. Does the Minister agree it could be a game changer for public transport for the UK, and would she join me in congratulating the team for pioneering this in the West Midlands?
Well, I am delighted to hear about more pioneering innovations in the West Midlands. Doesn't surprise me at all. I was visiting the West Midlands just last week to see some of their ground-breaking work across a number of travel innovations. And of course, the West Midlands leads the world, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid even leads Chorley in these matters. But I want to very strongly congratulate all those involved in the project in Coventry and Dudley. And we are always interested in building on these successes and seeing them benefit more areas in the future.
Question 15, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I start by congratulating my right honourable friend for her recognition in the birthday honours list. My HS2 Land and Property Review, published in November 2020, set out a number of measures to speed up the payment of compensation, and we're making rapid progress in implementing the recommendations of that review.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has done a great job since taking over as HS2 Minister, but I'm sure he will agree with me that there is so much evidence of appalling behaviour from HS2 in the way it's treating individual households and businesses, in its slowness to compensate, even outgoing legal costs of those who are simply trying to protect their own homes and businesses. So can he tell us what he can do to actually improve the compassion, quite frankly, as well as the efficiency of HS2?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend makes a powerful case, and HS2 Limited can and must treat those affected by HS2 with consideration and respect. To that end, the review that the root and branch review of land and property cases that I commissioned, I'm pleased to say, is now starting to bear fruit. I hold HS2 Limited to direct account in a fortnightly review of the most complex cases, and I'd like to pay tribute to my right honourable friend for drawing my attention to several pressing constituency cases in her own area.
We have a substantive question to the Secretary, Shapps.
Alongside the phase-out of dates, we pledged £2.8 billion as a package of measures to support the industry and consumers to make the switch to cleaner vehicles, and discussions with my colleagues are ongoing.
Let's go to Ellie Reeves. Ellie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The 2030 ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles is a necessary step to reaching our net zero targets. But to enable mass adoption of electric vehicles, we need to fix the issues around charging points. Currently, many in service don't work, charge inefficiently, are underprovided and excessively priced in some areas. And because they are run by independent providers, there's no joined up national infrastructure. Given that we need to roll out widespread charging points across the UK and tackle these issues, does the Minister agree with me that the government needs to invest much more and also properly regulate the sector so that it's better joined up, more reliable and more accessible?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as a driver of an electric vehicle, I've experienced the exact issue she's talking about. There are too many different membership cards. You have to use too many different forms of payment and sign up to too many sites before you can even pay for those miles that you charge. So we do have a plan in place which has included taking secondary legislation action, which will require all those with rapid charges, all those providing rapid charge, to allow for contactless payment, which I know the Honourable Lady will appreciate.
Shadow Minister Curran.
As a fellow electric car driver, I can't wait for those regulations to come forward. As the Committee on Climate Change makes clear this morning, the government is not delivering on the policies needed to meet its climate targets. As well as incentivising EV purchases and improving EV charging infrastructure, we also need EVs to be built in Britain too. So what conversations has he had with the Business Secretary about government support for EV manufacturing at the Ford Hailwood plant, which is crucial if we're to secure the future viability of the site, and about saving job-making vehicle components at the GKN plant in Birmingham too?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady will know that the government's pledged £500 million towards creating factories to produce the batteries, which is a very important part of the development of electric cars. I also quite often hear people say that we're somehow falling behind. In fact, we had the second highest sale of electric vehicles in Europe in the first quarter of this year. 1 in 7 cars now sold have plug-in. I can't comment directly on the discussions that my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, has had about those specific plants, but I can tell you the discussions are ongoing in order to achieve the infrastructure delivery in this country, including the manufacturing base, which will continue to ensure that we lead Europe when it comes to electric car provision.
Substantive question to Minister Heaton-Harris.
East West Rail Company will consider the 2021 consultation responses. The 2019 consultation met open and fair consultation standards.
Let's go to Mohammed Jassim. Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The 2019 East West Rail consultation and 2020 route announcement made no mention that 6 tracks would be needed at Bedford Midland Station or consequential demolition in Poet area of my constituency. So I urge the Minister, please consider the many representation on this matter from members of the public, rail groups, local councillors, and Bedford Borough's SLC rail report showing a credible 4 tracks option which would avoid the loss of homes.
I can assure the honourable gentleman that this is actually a non-statutory consultation. It's a consultation where we really do want to listen to the opinions of people affected up and down or across the route of East West Rail, and will most certainly take into account his representations here today.
Richard Polly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents are appalled at the environmental damage that the East West Rail route will cause across Bedfordshire, and baffled why this 21st century project will use a 19th century fuel. So will my right honourable friend or my honourable friend please look again at the environmental considerations that East West Rail has undertaken and bring them up to scratch?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for the pragmatic and dedicated campaign that he's running on behalf of his constituents and others about this issue. I know my honourable friend has encouraged his constituents to have their say in the recent consultation. I thank him for that too. We are committed to decarbonising our railways, and East West Rail will continue to assess the potential environmental effects as part of the route alignment development work. An environmental impact assessment will be undertaken and an environmental statement submitted when the development consent order application is made to the Planning Inspectorate.
We now have a substantive question to Minister McLean.
The Transport Decarbonisation Plan will set out a pathway to achieving net zero, and we are delivering ambitious international COP26 campaigns, including a zero-emission vehicles campaign that aims to at least double the pace of the global transition to zero-emission vehicles to achieve all new cars and vans being zero-emission by 2040 or sooner, an aviation campaign that will galvanise industry, state and civil society support for international action to reduce the climate impacts of aviation, and a maritime campaign where we will deliver important cross-sectoral opportunities for significant emissions reductions nationally and internationally.
Right, we go to Peter Grant. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Scottish Government is committed to cutting car use by 20% by the year 2030. And to provide an interest-free loan for first-time buyers of new and used electric vehicles. In contrast, the British Government is cutting the grant for electric vehicle purchase by 50%. Could the Minister explain how that 50% cut in support will help to facilitate the decarbonisation of transport?
Well, Mr Speaker, I would like to remind the honourable gentleman that his constituents in Scotland, as across the UK, have benefited from up to £1.3 billion of the support to help them transition to electric vehicles. Yeah. Shall we look at the facts, Mr Speaker? The plug-in car grant, the home charge grant, the on-street chargers, the workplace chargers are all funded by the UK government for the benefits of his constituents and across the United Kingdom.
Can I just say, I do apologise for the noise. There's a helicopter somewhere overhead. I know it's transport questions, but it is getting a bit much. Shadow Minister Sam Terry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As someone who's regularly stuck on the A13 in traffic, no one wants to return to levels of pollution and congestion we saw before the pandemic began, particularly as emerging evidence indicates exposure to air pollution increases the severity of coronavirus symptoms and other respiratory conditions. And that's why I'm so glad to see the work done by brilliant publicly run light rail systems such as Tyne and Wear Metro and Tramlink, led by fantastic local Labour administrations. Light rail networks are effective means to reduce congestion, pollution, given they produce next to no pollution at the point of use. So I'd like to know, Mr Speaker, what assurances will the Minister therefore give to support projects that incorporate light rail, tram trains, electric and hydrogen buses, such as the mass transit system that's been proposed by the new West Yorkshire Combined Authority Mayor?
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I hope the honourable gentleman was listening earlier when I spoke at this dispatch box about the support the government has provided for the West Midlands Combined Authority, led by the Conservative Mayor Andy Street, for light rail and a number of other transport innovations. But, Mr Speaker, the point is that this government is investing in zero-carbon, green transport across the whole country. We intend to build back better and greener from this pandemic, and we will create hundreds of thousands of skilled green jobs across the country as we do so.
SNP spokesperson Gavin Newlands.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The consensus at the Transport Committee yesterday was, with the Ministers included, was that the EV market was immature. So quite why the government would reduce support when EVs are still a lot more expensive is beyond me, because the fact is they have cut the grant by 50%. In addition to what my honourable friend said in terms of the interest-free loans, we actually doubled that home charge grant in Scotland as well. But on the decarbonisation plan, the Minister said last week we've done a huge amount of work on the plan. I'm not satisfied with the final draft because it does not meet the ambition we need in order to reach those incredibly challenging targets. Quite how the DfT have done extensive work on it, yet it still lacks ambition, is beyond me, Mr Speaker. So will we see this before the summer recess? Yes or no?
Yes.
Tim Lawton.
Visa.
Minister.
23. Give me, Mr. Forgive me, Mr Speaker. Thank you. The funding, we have committed to improvements on the A27, including the sections around Worthing and Lancing, and Highways England is working to identify options to go to consultation next year.
Speaker, as anyone setting out for Chorley from the south coast will know, the Worthing to Lancing section of the A27 is one of the most congested roads in the whole of the south east. In 2014, we were allocated £70 million as part of RIS 1. 7 years on, several thousand additional houses nearby on, a new IKEA attracting 2 million customer journeys a year about to open. Nothing has happened. Now we've just been allocated apparently £20 million in the budget for delivery of something between 2025 and 2030. So could we please have a bit of levelling up for infrastructure in Sussex urgently?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this vital issue. It is, of course, right and critically important to get the right solution for the right place. Highways England is actively working on this project and particularly working very closely with stakeholders because this is a very sensitive area. And I therefore hope my honourable friend will welcome that Highways England is engaging and working very closely with stakeholders on detailed options for the A27, and there will be a consultation on all of these next year.
A substantive question to Minister Courts.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Department fully expects Eurostar will continue to be a highly successful, profitable company carrying record passengers once international travel recovers.
Let's go to Jeff Smith. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. But the Minister knows there's been a real threat to Eurostar's survival, and British business leaders and the Transport Select Committee Chair all called for our government to be part of the solution. Eurostar isn't just a vital service, but contributes to our net zero agenda. So when we're in a climate crisis, as well as a COVID crisis, the Minister think it's right that the government should be giving billions in loans and guarantees to air travel, risk Eurostar going under?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the government welcomes the recent announcements from the company, its shareholders and lenders regarding a new financing package. We will continue to engage with Eurostar to fully understand the company's position, but we would expect shareholders, including the majority shareholder SNCF, the French state-owned railway, to fully exhaust all options and to play their full part.
We have a substantive question to Minister Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is for local authorities in the area to promote any further improvements to local connectivity across the River Tyne.
Let's go to Chiomara.
Well, I would like to thank the Minister for that response, but it isn't really one, is it? I mean, as well as being a great icon of North East people, culture and engineering, the Tyne Bridge is an essential part of our transport infrastructure, and it's in a dire state. Now, honourable members from across the region, together with the local authority leaders, the North of Tyne Mayor and the Police and Crime Commissioner have all written to the Community Secretary and the Transport Secretary in support of an £18.5 million bid to the Levelling Up Fund. So does the Minister agree that the Tyne Bridge must be levelled up to a fit state to celebrate its 100th birthday in 2028 as a beautiful and functional symbol of the North?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question. I am aware of the bid that has gone in as part of the Levelling Up Fund. Obviously, the Department of Transport and the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government will assess the bid submitted to that fund, and we expect to announce the outcome of the competition in the autumn. But the Department of Transport is also aware of a proposal for the bridge, including the bid for £36 million from the Major Road Network funding developed by Transport for the North on behalf of North East partners. So DFT officials continue to work with Newcastle City Council on the business case for that proposal.
Jameson.
Question 27, please, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that flexible season tickets went on sale on Monday, and they will be available for use from next Monday.
Sunderland.
Mr. Speaker, back in 2018, South Western Railway undertook to conduct a review to ensure that we've got earlier and later trains on the network. With many of my constituents working in the care sector, often in antisocial hours, and dependent on public transport, will my right honourable friend agree to work with me and SWR to make the change? Thank you.
Well, my right honourable friend's absolutely right to raise this issue of flexibility with train travel, particularly as we return post-COVID, which is why the flexible season tickets are very important. And I'd be delighted to arrange for him to meet up with the Rail Minister in order to discuss the specific issue which concerns him on SWR.
Mark Fletcher.
28, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through schemes such as the Restoring Your Railways Fund and the National Bus Strategy, we are determined to ensure that rural areas have the transport links that they need to grow and prosper.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Next month I will be launching a bus survey across the Bolsover constituency, because many of my villagers, particularly the rural villagers, have either lost services or are completely isolated, like Hillcott. Can the Minister commit to coming and meeting with some of the residents that have been sort of most eloquent in their arguments around what this loss of services has done to their communities?
Excellent. Well, I'm sure my honourable friend's survey outputs will assist his local authority in the development of the bus service improvement plan over the coming months and help ensure that we bus back better from COVID-19. My honourable friend, the Baroness Veer, the Minister for Roads, would be happy to meet with my honourable friend and his residents to coincide with the launch of his survey.
I'll be right.
29, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'd like to answer this with question 30. The transformation of our railways has now started, and passengers are already benefiting as we're investing billions in the rail across the UK, including with the flexible tickets just announced.
Kevin Tolliver.
Given York's historic connections and its strategic location, does my right honourable friend think that it would make the perfect location for a new headquarters for a great British rail?
Honourable friend is absolutely right. It's a stunning location. I launched the William Shapps Rail Review at the York Railway Museum. I commend it to everybody in this House and beyond. And I think he's right that York could provide a very attractive location for great British railways, although that is a matter which is some way down the line yet.
Let's go To Andrew Gwynn. Andrew.
The world's first passenger railway station is located on Liverpool Road in Manchester. And as the Secretary of State knows, Greater Manchester has an objective to integrate rail stations and commuter rail services into a single joined-up public transport network alongside bus, Metrolink, walking and cycling. The best way to do that is to devolve the necessary funding and powers for rail. So can the Secretary of State reassure me that Great British Railways, in partnership with places like Greater Manchester, will not shut down the route to securing this?
Yesterday, I was at what will become Great Britain's biggest ever railway built in one go. That's at Old Oak Common. So it's fantastic to hear about the railway station that he talks about in his constituency, the first ever railway station. I think it's now a museum, if I'm correct. But I know that he has read and studied the William Shapps rail reform and will have taken particular note of page 41, which contains information about that devolution plan, which I don't think will disappoint him when it comes to bringing together those services, a matter that I was speaking to the Manchester Mayor, Greater Manchester Mayor about just this week.
Matthew Petticoat.
31, Mr. Speaker. TfL submitted a strategic outline business case for the devolution of these services in late 2019, and the department considered the potential benefits and risks associated with this proposal to be finely balanced, and we were doing further work with TfL when the pandemic struck. I have to admit that not much work has been going on since that time.
Matthew Petticoat.
I thank the Minister for that answer. He knows that I'm firmly of the view that the transfer of South Eastern services to TfL is the best long-term means of guaranteeing passengers in my constituency the fast, frequent and high-quality metro-style rail services they desire. As we emerge from the coronavirus crisis, could I ask him what plans his department has to pick up and take forward the conversations that took place with TfL about the matter early last year, and will he meet with me in due course to discuss the future of the South Eastern franchise in more detail?
Yeah, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I know his passion in this area. And as I say, I mean, since the pandemic struck, the department has had to be very much focused on keeping services running, and whilst developing our passenger-focused reforms. As the Secretary of State just said, Great British Railways will be organised around regional divisions so that decisions are made closer to the places where the railways serve. And the white paper also includes a commitment for strategic partnership with TfL and other local authorities to make sure the rail sector is working best for the passengers in London. I'd be delighted to meet with him to discuss these matters further.
Substantive question to the Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to answer this with question 33. Staff safety is a priority, which is evidenced by the very significant investment that's been made.
Let's go to Tonya Antoniazzi. Tonya.
Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, representatives from the PCS trade union and senior management, including the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Transport, had reached a deal to bring an end to the ongoing industrial dispute over COVID safety. But in a development unprecedented in 20 years of civil service negotiations, the department subsequently reneged on a deal, much of which they had written themselves, with no word of explanation. Now, are PCS right in believing that the deal was scuppered at the last minute after the direct intervention of the Secretary of State? And will the Minister apologise to those members of the public who now face further backlogs as a result of this unnecessary ideological refusal to find a resolution to this dispute?
Well, Mr. Speaker, with the greatest respect to the Honourable Lady, the only thing that's unnecessary is for the PCS union to be continuing a strike, which is purported to be about safety, when in fact £4.7 million has been invested at DVLA to make it COVID safe. An additional building has been rented, air conditioning has been changed so the air comes directly in from the outside, perspex screens have been put in place, zones and bubbles have been created, and there's a very substantive cleaning regime. If this dispute is indeed about making sure the building is COVID secure, then this has been achieved. So what we need to know is why the demands then switch to demands about pay and demands about holiday, which have nothing to do with being COVID secure.
Let's go to Carolyn Harris. Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if the Secretary of State would therefore be willing to accompany me and other colleagues who have constituents working in the DVLA to the site so that he can show us just how safe it is, because our constituents are telling us a completely different story.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's probably important that we allow those who are experts in these things to follow through. Public Health Wales have signed this off. Swansea Council Environmental Health Team have signed this off. The Health and Safety Executive have signed this off. I think that we should be listening to all of those health experts as they decide what should happen in a site like this and look at the data and the facts and then be able to make the decision from there. I don't think there is any further excuse for ensuring that, or for preventing vulnerable people from being able to pick up the documentation that they require from DVLA, which is the only thing this ongoing strike is now achieving.
We have a substantive question to Minister McLean.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the National Bus Strategy, which draws on £3 billion of transformational funding, sets out the government's vision for bus services across England, including in isolated communities. And we believe that those bus service improvement plans, delivered through enhanced partnerships and franchising arrangements, will deliver what is needed. And alongside this, we announced 17 successful rural mobility fund bids, each receiving a share of £20 million funding to trial innovative, bookable minibuses where demand is more dispersed.
Let's go to Mary Kelly Forth. Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2010, 134 million miles of bus routes have been lost, and bus coverage in Britain is the lowest it's been in 30 years. In villages like Pittington and Waterhouse in my constituency, bus services are virtually non-existent. Can the Minister confirm if the National Bus Strategy's Bus Service Improvement Plan will give local authorities enough power and resources to deliver regular bus services to communities on routes that may not be commercially viable?
Well, the Honourable Lady has put her finger on the entire purpose of the Bus Back Better strategy, which is absolutely about ensuring better, cleaner, safer, more reliable buses with simpler fares and ticketing. It's absolutely what communities like hers and others all over the country want. And the government is supporting local authorities through funding and have set aside £25 million to help build the capacity and capabilities of local authorities. Every local transport authority has received £100,000 in capacity support to enable them to submit bids to the funding and get those bus services back.
We now go to Topicals with the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to say, following up on the conversations earlier, that I'm delighted to inform the House that over the next few weeks we expect a milestone of rapid chargers being available with 3,000 at different locations and 25,000 public charging points. That's more charging points locations than petrol stations in this country. As mentioned, that's on top of £2.8 billion of government support for the transition to zero emission, with companies like GridServe, BP Pulse and Shell committing to significant investment in charging infrastructure, working together to back up the fact that we now have more rapid chargers per 100 miles of major road network in this country than any other location in Europe.
Leila Moran with Topical 1. Leila Moran. There we are, Leila.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Oxfordshire County Council, the Vale of Whitehorse District Council and I applied to the Levelling Up Fund for the snappily titled B4044 Strategic Cycle Link between Botley and Ensham. This project would significantly boost sustainable travel between the new housing planned around Ensham to Oxford City Centre, linking through more deprived communities. Does the Minister agree that this is exactly the kind of active travel initiative that we need more of in areas of high housing and economic growth, especially given our desire to achieve zero carbon Oxfordshire by 2050?
I haven't seen a particular application yet, but we do know that there are over £2 billion of active travel funding for walking and cycling, which this government has put in a record amount. And I know the Honourable Lady will be delighted that Oxfordshire investment has now reached £355 million in different transport environments, and that's on top of the £760 million for East West Rail. So when it comes to investing in her constituency in Oxfordshire, this Conservative government is really going for it.
We now go to the Chair of the Select Committee. You, Merriman, you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Secretary of State is hearing, as I am, that our airports and border force are getting people through arrivals more quickly and therefore more safely. Is he confident that we will be in a position to get more people who've perhaps been double jabbed through arrivals, that we have digitisation and the NHS app will seek to deliver proof of double jab?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend's absolutely right. The last few weeks have seen a remarkable digital transformation in the background. That means that people who've been coming in, perhaps from green countries, have been going to e-gates, which have been updated both physically and through software, or indeed to see a border force officer who've had their passport scanned in one way or the other. And that's been automatically linked back to the passenger locator form that they filled out before they left their country of departure, telling Border Force whether they've had a pre-departure test, they've got future tests booked, and linking the whole machinery together. So yes, the automation is really starting to get into place now.
So the Secretary of State, Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, hundreds of workers in the aviation and tourism industry held a demonstration outside Parliament urging the government to protect their jobs and the jobs of 1.5 million people employed in aviation and the wider supply chain. So, on behalf of the countless staff and trade unions I spoke to, will he finally deliver on the sectoral deal his government promised but has so far failed to deliver? And when he makes his announcement later on the traffic light system, which should be noted, Mr. Speaker, isn't being made to this House, will he publish the criteria, the country-by-country assessment and the direction of travel for each country to give travellers confidence to plan for this summer?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I find the honourable gentleman's policy confusing only because, as I understand it, he has previously called for all countries to be put into the red category, meaning there'd be no travel at all, and in addition, the former, I have to say, Shadow Chancellor, saying that Labour would never provide financial support to these companies. And yet here they are now saying that they want more support and indeed doesn't want to follow his own policy. I have to say that having a red, amber and green list enables people to see which countries are in which category, and that the JBC are publishing the data on the website to show why particular countries are in each category.
Mr. Speaker, I can give you an assurance that I have tried my hardest to get the Transport Secretary to fully understand our sectoral deal and the way that we've laid it out. But, Mr. Speaker, I can't help the confusion that continues to reign with his Transport Secretary. Let's now move closer to home. We've had two questions today on the DVLA in Swansea, and the Transport Secretary did not give a convincing answer to either. It was reported last week that a deal had been reached with staff and trade unions and the government to finally resolve the industrial dispute over health and safety failings at the DVLA in Swansea. But it was reported that the deal was pulled last minute by a minister. So can the Secretary of State confirm whether he or senior members of the department pulled the deal, and if so, why? The Secretary of State and his department are now squarely against the loyal workforce at DVLA Swansea. What will he now do to restore trust and confidence in those fantastic workers?
Mr. Speaker, the Public and Commercial Services Union continued to take industrial action, which is targeting services having a negative impact on some of the most vulnerable people in society. And the fact of the matter is, the safety concerns have been signed off by Public Health Wales, by the Health and Safety Executive, by the Welsh Government, by the UK Government, and yet this strike continues. Now, apparently not about healthcare, but about demands over money instead. Will the honourable gentleman, I wonder, actually ask people to go back to their work in order to help vulnerable people in this country? That is the question this House needs to know.
Next question, Andrew Griffith. Andrew. Not here. Let us go to SNP spokesperson Gavin Newton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've lost count of the number of times that I've asked this government about its long abandoned commitment to specific support for the aviation sector. And despite the Secretary of State's tinkering with the traffic light system, it looks increasingly unlikely there will be any summer season. It's clear to the dogs on the street that an aviation travel and tourism recovery package and a targeted extension of furlough is now an imperative. So how does the Secretary of State plan to better support the sector and its workers like those has been mentioned that were at the Travel Day of Action protests in College Green yesterday?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Department does recognise the severe impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on regional air travel. We've supported critical routes through policies such as public service obligations and through the Airport and Ground Operations Support Scheme. The Government is working on a strategic framework for the sector, which will focus on building back better and ensuring successful aviation sector for the future. But what the aviation sector will certainly be glad of is that it is this government that is looking after their interests, not the Scottish Government, which has been accused of sacrificing the industry by the Scottish Passenger Agents Association.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the new flexible season ticket that was introduced this week? It will save someone travelling from Stamford-le Hope into London 3 days a week over £120 and someone travelling from Basildon over £100. Does my right honourable friend agree? As more and more people move to hybrid working, it's important we have flexibility in our public transport systems.
Excellent question. Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend's absolutely right, and I saw some coverage of the flexible season tickets, and it is true to say that ticketing is complex across the network, but compared with somebody who would otherwise buy a regular season ticket, somebody travelling 2 or 3 days a week would always be at least 20% better off with a flexible season ticket.
Let's go to Janet Davey. Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A constituent of mine who was blind tragically died last year when he fell in front of a train due to lack of safety audio announcement and tactile paving on the platform. I know the government has plans for tactile paving, although unclear at the moment, but while we are waiting for this to happen, will the Minister commit to introducing audio announcements which provide safety information at railway stations as a matter of urgency to keep people safe and to prevent another person from losing their life?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. It was an absolutely tragic case that I'm familiar with. Indeed, I know that my Honourable friend, the Rail Minister, met with the partner of the deceased last week and discussed all of these matters, including the integration of audible announcements, which we consider to be very important indeed. And we are speeding up the introduction of tactile pavements close to, within railway stations and in particular close to the rail tracks.
Let's go to Nikki Aiken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Improving our air quality is a major priority for my constituents, and both they and I remain very concerned about the ongoing number of drivers who continue to idle their vehicles when parked at the curbside. A single minute of idling an engine of a car creates 9 litres of CO2. Unfortunately, Regulation 98 of the Road Vehicles Regulation 1986 does not adequately equip local authorities with the power they need to deter repeat engine idlers, only an £80 fine. With this in mind, does my right honourable friend agree with me that we should really now be considering increasing fines for vehicle drivers who are continuing to engine idle, making it a genuine, effective deterrent?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I know my honourable friend's a passionate campaigner on this issue, and I completely agree that it's vital that we take action. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, it will be better technology, such as stop-start and zero-emission vehicles, which will solve this issue. The UK is a global leader in the development and the manufacture of electric vehicles, and we will continue to work to foster that position.
Let's go to Jeff Smith. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Experts have warned that the carbon impact of the government's £27 billion road building programme could be around 100 times greater than the official government estimates. So why won't the government reassure us by committing to a comprehensive environmental impact assessment of the plans?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think in the same session we've managed to, the Honourable Gentleman, be firstly anti-air, now he's anti-road. As I've just explained to the House, there is a way in which we can ensure that this country stays well connected and we serve the people that we represent, and that we ensure that we foster technology, because it's technology that is going to give us the answer to the zero carbon emissions challenge that we have.
11 withdrawn, so we go to Cat Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ending financial support before demand is returned could leave bus and light rail operators facing a cliff edge. So can I ask what plans the government has to ensure a smooth recovery for operators like Blackpool Transport to expand their timetables and on routes like the 2C, which runs through to Knott-End-on-Sea via many other villages?
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right that bus transport's required a huge amount of support. We put hundreds of millions in during this pandemic. We've obviously also launched the Bus Back Better bus strategy as well, which puts a lot of money into buses, some £3 billion. In the meantime, I will ensure that we return to this House to talk about further ways in which we can support our bus sector and ensure that those essential local links that she describes are maintained.
Let's go to Craig Whittaker. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Calder Valley line is a major strategic passenger and freight line that was placed as the top priority in the 2015 Northern Sparks report, which highlights that the Calder Valley line is long overdue in playing its part in decarbonising the transport network. Can my right honourable friend update the House on when we can expect the publication of the government's transport decarbonisation plan?
Mr. Speaker, yes, the transport decarbonisation plan is very central to our lead into COP26, and it's absolutely essential that we get this right, and indeed that it's ambitious enough to match the scale of the problem that we face. So my honourable friend won't need to wait long, and I think he'll be impressed by the ambition.
Try again. Adam Javid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was recently contacted by the McKenna family in my constituency in regards to the availability of driving tests. Ross had to travel to Blackpool in order to sit his theory test, and he's unable to sit his practical test in a timely manner because there's a backlog of tests. This is an issue that's impacting many of my constituents, so will the department speak to the relevant agencies and look at giving additional funding in order to create more localised testing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, can I welcome the Honourable Lady to the House, and I think what is certainly the first question in transport questions. And secondly, can I say to her, in my own household, I have two teenagers who quite literally ask me the same questions every day of the week. There is a very large backlog, about 440,000 due to the pandemic. There's a recovery plan that the agency have in place to increase the number of tests carried out every day, and I will personally be seeing to them keeping to track on that recovery plan because, as she says, young people need to be able to take their tests and pass.
Let's go to Mary Robinson. Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Lorry drivers like my constituent Stuart have kept this country going through the pandemic, but they face a threat of robbery and assault on a regular basis. He tells me there aren't enough facilities where drivers can take their legally required breaks, forcing many to park in laybys, and that even the facilities that exist can be inadequate and insecure. Could I ask the Minister to look at this issue and work with the industry to increase the number of secure truck stops for these drivers who are a critical part of our economy?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I join my honourable friend in paying tribute to the hauliers like Stuart who have quite literally kept this country moving over the course of the last 18 months. My department will continue work started last year to engage with stakeholders, including the freight associations, to encourage the development of more safe, secure and high-quality lorry parking.
Nick Smith? Not here. Right, let us see if Sarah Britliff's online. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Improving our railway stations and improving connectivity across East Lancashire is key to levelling up and making sure we spread opportunity, but we still have accessibility issues at some of our train stations, such as Oswald's Whistle. Can the Secretary of State outline whether there will be further support to improve this across areas such as mine in Hyndburn and Haslingden?
Well, Mr. Speaker, all of the funding currently available to Access for All has been allocated to projects, including nearby Accrington Station, with works due to be completed by 2024 at the latest. When further funding is available, any station without an accessible route into the station and to all platforms will be a potential candidate.
Right, let's go for the final question from Sir Greg Knight. Sir Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ministers are aware that E10 fuel, due to be introduced from September this year, is not compatible with all motor vehicles, and that older vehicles in particular can suffer serious damage if they use it. What extra measures are the government intending to take, therefore, to ensure that motorists are fully aware of these dangers so they do not in error fill their vehicles with the wrong fuel? And can a minister also assure me that the information on the Government UK website on whether a vehicle can run on E10 fuel or not is completely up to date, comprehensive and correct?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can reassure that that website is indeed already up to date and will be accurate. It is the case of some older vehicles and historic vehicles, the kind of cars that I know he is very keen on, which don't take E10. It will be very clearly marked, and he'll be pleased to hear that E5 will continue to be available so that historic cars can continue on our roads.
I'm now suspending the House for 3 minutes to enable necessary arrangements to be made for the next business. Order. We now come to business questions. I call Fangham Debonair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Leader of the House please give us the forthcoming business?
Leader.
The business for the week commencing the 28th of June will include Monday, the 28th of June, the second reading of the Rating Coronavirus and Directors' Disqualification Dissolved Companies Bill, followed by a motion relating to the appointment of lay members to the Committee of Standards, followed by a motion relating to the membership of the Parliamentary Works Sponsor Body. Tuesday, the 29th of June, Estimates Day, first allotted day. There will be debates on estimates relating to the Department for Education and on the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Wednesday, the 30th of June, Estimates Day, second allotted day. There will be a debate on an estimate relating to the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. At 7 o'clock, the House will be asked to agree all outstanding estimates. Thursday, the 1st of July, proceedings on the Supply and Appropriation Main Estimates Bill, followed by a general debate on Windrush Day, followed by a general debate on Pride Month. The subjects for these debates were recommended by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday, the 2nd of July, the House will not be sitting. The provisional business for the week commencing the 5th of July will include Monday, the 5th of July, remaining stages of the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill. Tuesday, the 6th of July, the second reading of the Dissolution and Calling of Parliament Bill. Wednesday, the 7th of July, and Opposition Day, the fourth allotted day. There will be a debate on a motion in the name of the Scottish National Party, the subjects to be announced. Thursday, the 8th of July, a general debate on fuel poverty, followed by a debate on a motion relating to the implementation of the recommendations of the Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review. The subject for this debate was determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday, the 9th of July, the House will not be sitting.